At 29 years old, my wife Sophia, a woman whose beauty often turned heads, sat across from me at a dinner I had meticulously planned. But tonight, something about her demeanor was different, almost unsettling. I had spared no expense for this evening. The restaurant was one of the finest in town, the kind of place that demanded reservations weeks in advance. The candlelight flickered softly over the pristine white tablecloths, and the wine selection was top-notch. I had even surprised her with a diamond necklace she'd been eyeing for months, dropping nearly $1,000 to see her smile. But now, looking at her distant expression, I wondered if I had miscalculated entirely. Sophia seemed restless, her eyes darting around the room like she was searching for an escape. Normally, she'd focus on me during our evenings together, her sharp wit and laughter a constant presence. But tonight her focus was everywhere but here. I noticed it, but I didn't press her immediately. Once the main course was finished and a second glass of wine poured, she finally broke her silence. "Marcus, there's something I need to talk to you about," she began, her voice carefully measured, almost rehearsed. I set my glass down and leaned back, folding my arms. "Go ahead," I said simply, my tone calm but firm. She hesitated, clearly weighing her words. "I've been thinking about who I am, who I want to be, and I've come to realize that I need to explore myself outside of this marriage." I raised an eyebrow, my gaze locked on her. "Explore yourself? You're going to have to spell that out for me." Sophia swallowed hard, avoiding my eyes. "I think I need to pursue relationships with other people. I believe this is something I have to do for my own growth. In the long run, it will make me a better partner for you." I let her words hang in the air for a moment, unmoving. Then I leaned forward slightly, my voice steady. "So, what you're saying is you want to see other men, and you expect me to just sit back and let it happen?" She glanced around nervously, as though she expected me to raise my voice or cause a scene. "Marcus, please. I still love you. This doesn't mean I'm abandoning us. I just need to explore this side of myself." I smirked, shaking my head. "Let me get this straight. You want to explore your identity by stepping out on our marriage, and you're telling me this here, in public, to avoid a real conversation at home? Clever move, Sophia. But you're underestimating me." Her cheeks flushed, and she tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled it back. "Marcus, I'm doing this because I think it's the right thing for me, and for us." "For us?" I scoffed. "Don't insult my intelligence. You're not doing this for us. You're doing this for yourself, plain and simple. Don't dress it up as some kind of noble journey for self-improvement." She opened her mouth to respond, but I didn't give her the chance. "Let me ask you something, Sophia. Do you think I'm the kind of man who tolerates this nonsense? You've got a lot of nerve sitting here, wearing the necklace I just bought you, and telling me you're looking for the attention of other men. Unbelievable." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Marcus, keep your voice down. This isn't the place for a scene." I laughed dryly. "Oh, I'm not making a scene. I'm just letting you know exactly where I stand. You can dress this up however you want, but at the end of the day, it's betrayal. You want to betray this marriage, and you want my blessing to do it. That's not going to happen." She sat there in stunned silence, her lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, she seemed to realize the weight of her actions. But then she doubled down. "This isn't about betrayal, Marcus. It's about honesty. I'm trying to be open with you." "Honesty? Spare me," I said, my voice firm but controlled. "You don't drop a bombshell like this and call it honesty. If you respected me, you wouldn't have blindsided me like this. And let's be clear, this is your decision, not mine. Don't act like I have any part in it." The tension between us was palpable. I could see that she'd expected me to react differently, to plead with her or make concessions. But that wasn't going to happen. I was done giving her the benefit of the doubt. "Marcus, can we at least talk about this calmly?" she asked, her tone softening as she tried to regain control of the conversation. I stood up, tossing my napkin onto the table. "We've talked enough for tonight. You've made your intentions clear, Sophia. But don't mistake my silence for agreement. We'll deal with this at home." Without another word, I signaled for the check and left her sitting there, stunned and speechless. Sophia leaned forward, her voice soft but calculated. "Marcus, I need you to understand why this is important to me. I love you deeply, You're my soulmate. I picture us growing old together, starting a family, and building a beautiful life. But right now, there are parts of myself I feel I've lost. I need to uncover them, and this is the only way I know how. I'm asking for a short period to explore this. Afterward, I promise you'll have all of me again. She paused, her words hanging in the air like a challenge, daring me to respond. I didn't flinch. Instead, I met her gaze with unwavering calm, my voice steady and cold. You're asking me to stand by while you walk out on our marriage, thinking you can just waltz back in afterward like nothing happened? That's not how this works, Sophia. Her lips parted, but no words came. I pressed on. You're trying to sell this as some kind of temporary journey for your growth. Let me be very clear. You don't get to play with our marriage like it's a rental car you can take out, drive recklessly, and return when you're done. That's not love. That's selfishness. Her face faltered, but she quickly masked it with a pleading expression. Marcus, this isn't about being selfish. It's about honesty. I'm trying to be truthful with you because I care about us. I scoffed, the sound sharp enough to make her flinch. Truthful? If you cared about us, you wouldn't be sitting here trying to dismantle what we've built while pretending it's for the greater good. You don't drop a bomb like this during dinner and expect me to just nod and smile. You think I'm the kind of man who'll let his wife chase other men under the guise of self-discovery? Think again. The tension at the table was electric, drawing uneasy glances from nearby diners. Sophia leaned closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. Marcus, please lower your voice. We don't need everyone in the restaurant listening to our private conversation. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. You're worried about the people here overhearing, but you're not worried about what this says about you? About us? Interesting priorities, Sophia. Her expression hardened, but I could see the cracks forming. She had underestimated me, thinking she could manipulate the conversation to her advantage. You're acting like I've made up my mind, she said, her tone defensive. I'm asking for your support in this, Marcus. For our future. I stood, straightening my jacket with deliberate composure. If this is the future you see for us, Sophia, then you're living in a fantasy. I'm not a doormat, and I won't pretend to be one just to spare your feelings. Without waiting for a response, I tossed my napkin onto the table and signaled the waiter. The check is on me. You can take a cab home. Her eyes widened in disbelief as I walked away. I didn't bother looking back. The next morning, the sunlight streaming through the windshield was unforgiving. I stretched, stepping out of my car and taking in my unfamiliar surroundings. After leaving the restaurant, I had driven aimlessly for hours, clearing my head and formulating a plan. Now, it was time to face the situation head-on. After finding a nearby diner, I settled into a booth with a strong cup of coffee and a hearty breakfast. Sophia's texts and missed calls flashed on my phone screen, but I ignored them. She could wait. For now, I needed to think. Her sudden declaration wasn't just an insult to me. It was an insult to our marriage. I didn't need to drown in self-pity or question my worth. Instead, I needed clarity. If Sophia truly believed this exploration was necessary, then I needed to decide what I was willing to tolerate. By the time I finished my breakfast, I had my answer. There was no room for compromise. Sophia had made her decision, and now she would face the consequences. The confrontation. When I pulled into the driveway, Sophia rushed out to greet me, her face a mix of worry and relief. Marcus, where were you? I was so scared something happened to you, she said, reaching for my arm. I stepped back, holding up a hand. I've fine, but we need to talk properly this time. No interruptions, no distractions. Her relief turned to unease, but she nodded. Of course. Let's talk. I walked past her and headed for the bedroom, shedding my rumpled clothes and stepping into the shower. As the hot water washed over me, I rehearsed what I would say. This wasn't about emotions or hurt feelings. This was about setting boundaries and reestablishing control. By the time I emerged, dressed and composed, I was ready. Sophia sat on the couch, waiting nervously. I took a seat across from her, my expression unreadable. Let me save you some time, I began, my tone firm. If you think I'll sit by while you explore relationships with other men, you're delusional. You can either recommit to this marriage, or you can walk away. But there's no third option. I won't tolerate disrespect, and I won't negotiate with betrayal. Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't waver. Marcus, please. I'm not trying to hurt you. You just want everything on your terms, I interrupted. But that's not how marriage works. You either honor your vows, or you don't. So tell me, Sophia, are you in, or are you out? After freshening up and slipping into clean clothes, I stepped into the kitchen, the aroma of brewing coffee filling the air. Sophia was seated at the kitchen island, her gaze following me intently. She looked like she was ready to launch into another speech, but I wasn't going to let her dictate the pace of this conversation. Grabbing my coffee, I pulled out a chair across from her and placed a notepad and pen on the table. My tone was measured but firm. All right, Sophia, let's make this simple. I want you to clearly explain what you're thinking. Why, exactly, do you feel the need to explore relationships outside of our marriage? Sophia straightened, meeting my gaze with what she probably thought was confidence. Marcus, I need to feel validated as a woman. Lately, I've felt unfulfilled. I need to figure out what's missing in my life and address those needs on my own. I nodded, taking a slow sip of coffee before responding. So, let me get this straight. You're saying you're unsure of your needs and plan to figure them out by essentially stepping out on our marriage? It's not like that, she said quickly, her voice rising slightly. I'm not leaving. I'll still be here, in our home with you. I just need the freedom to structure my own time and figure things out. Structure your own time, I echoed, my tone laced with disbelief. When exactly were you planning to start this exploration? Tonight? Next week? I don't know. Maybe soon, she stammered, her confidence faltering. Whenever the right opportunity arises. Let me stop you right there, I said, leaning forward. I don't support this, Sophia. Not now, not ever. When we stood at the altar, we made a commitment. Lifelong partners, lifelong lovers. This isn't just a temporary experiment. It's a betrayal of everything we promised each other. She looked taken aback, but quickly recovered. Marcus, it's not that simple. I feel like we've lost something over the past couple of years. We're so consumed by work and routine. I don't feel valued the way I used to. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Valued? Everything I do, everything I've done for us. I've worked my ass off to provide for this life we built together. We're on the brink of paying off this house, Sophia. But now you're sitting here, telling me it's not enough? That I'm not enough. Her frustration was starting to show. It's not about you, Marcus. This is about me. I need to feel connected to myself again. I fixed her with a sharp look. Let's cut to the chase. Are you planning to see other men? To date them? To get physical with them? Sophia hesitated, biting her lip as she avoided my gaze. I don't know. Maybe if it feels right, with the right person. So, you're openly contemplating cheating, I said flatly, leaning back in my chair. At least be honest with yourself. It's not cheating if I'm being upfront about it, she shot back, her voice growing defensive. This isn't some back alley affair. I'm telling you, because I want us to move forward together. I exhaled sharply, setting my mug down. You think slapping a label of honesty on this makes it acceptable? Here's a reality check. Honesty doesn't justify betrayal. And this is betrayal, Sophia. She opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. Let me clarify the situation for you. You want to go out, meet other men, date them, maybe even sleep with them, all while living here with me under the same roof, expecting me to just sit back and smile about it. Is that about right? It's not that black and white, she insisted, her tone wavering now. I haven't made any concrete decisions yet. It seems pretty black and white to me, I replied, my voice firm. And let me ask you this. What happens to us in the meantime? Do you expect us to stay married, to continue as if nothing's changed while you explore? Yes, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. You and I, we're a family. I love you, Marcus. I want us to stay a family. This is just something I need to do for myself. I let out a dry chuckle, shaking my head. And how often do you plan to do this, Sophia? Every weekend? Every other day? Are you planning to turn our marriage into some kind of revolving door for your whims? I don't know, she said, her frustration bubbling to the surface. Why are you so focused on the details? Can't you just trust me? Trust you, I said, leaning forward, my eyes narrowing. You're asking me to trust you while you destroy the very foundation of that trust. I need to know exactly what my life is going to look like while you're off finding yourself. Or have you conveniently not thought that far ahead? She bristled, her composure cracking further. Marcus, I'm trying to be open with you. Can't you see that? I see you trying to justify selfishness, Sophia, I said bluntly. And before we go any further, I need clarity. Are you fully committed to this decision? Have you actually thought about what this will do to our marriage? She nodded but didn't meet my eyes, her silence speaking volumes. I stood, my chair scraping against the floor. Until you have the courage to face the consequences of your actions, don't expect me to humor your fantasy. You got a choice to make, Sophia. But don't take too long. I'm not a man who waits around. Her mouth opened to respond, but I didn't give her the chance. I turned and walked away, leaving her seated there, her words unspoken. As I stood from the table, Sophia's voice followed me, tinged with both frustration and desperation. Marcus, is that all you're going to say? Are you just walking away? I stopped, but didn't turn to face her. For now, Sophia, I've said what I needed to. The ball's in your court, but don't mistake my silence for compliance. Make your decision, and be prepared to live with the consequences. I left her sitting there, stunned into silence. Her usual confidence was unraveling, and I wasn't going to let her pull me into a debate that danced around the issue. This was no longer about convincing me. It was about her facing the reality of what she was asking for. Later that day, after cooling off for a few hours, I returned to the kitchen. Sophia had clearly been waiting, still perched at the island with her phone in hand. She looked up as I entered, her expression guarded but expectant. I poured myself another cup of coffee, taking a deliberate sip before speaking. I assume you've had some time to think, Sophia. She sighed, brushing her hair behind her ear. I have. But Marcus, I need you to hear me out. Then be quick about it, I replied, leaning against the counter. No more dancing around the issue. Say what you mean. She hesitated but eventually said, If you love me, you'll let me do this. I set my mug down with a sharp clink, the sound echoing in the quiet kitchen. And if you love me, Sophia, you wouldn't even ask. That's my final word on the matter. If you choose to pursue this exploration, there are terms, non-negotiable terms. Her eyes widened slightly, as though she hadn't expected me to respond so decisively. What do you mean, terms? Let me spell it out for you, I said, crossing my arms. If you're intent on seeing other men, you don't do it while living under my roof. You'll pack your things and leave. I don't care if it's with a friend like Jessica or a rented apartment. You'll find somewhere else to stay. And don't think for a second you'll be bringing them here. That's a line I won't allow to be crossed. But Marcus, she stammered, where am I supposed to go? This is my home too. Then maybe you should have thought of that before entertaining the idea of inviting other men into your life, I said sharply. Jessica seems like an obvious option. She's been through this before. Maybe she can offer you a couch while you explore. Or rent a place. You make good money. You can afford it. Sophia blinked, clearly taken aback by how resolute I was. You're serious. As serious as you were when you decided to ambush me with this nonsense, I said evenly. This isn't a negotiation, Sophia. You've made your desires clear, and I'm making mine just as clear. If you choose this path, you're out of this house. Her shoulders slumped slightly, but then she seemed to find a thread of defiance. What about us, Marcus? Will you wait for me while I figure things out? Will we still be together? I let out a dry laugh. Let me get this straight. You want me to sit here like a loyal dog while you date other men and then come back to me, expecting everything to go back to normal? You've got some nerve. I love you, Marcus, she said softly, her voice almost trembling. I want you to be my husband, the father of my children. That hasn't changed. Really? Because it feels like everything's changed, I shot back. And let me tell you something, Sophia. Love isn't just a word you throw around when it's convenient. It's shown through actions. And your actions right now are screaming the opposite. She opened her mouth to respond, but I raised a hand to stop her. Before we go any further, I need answers. Are you serious about this? Have you actually thought through what this means for our marriage? She hesitated, then nodded slowly. I've thought about it, Marcus, but I'm still figuring it out. That's what I thought, I said, shaking my head. You want to dive head first into this without any plan, without any consideration for what it'll do to me, to us. Her silence told me everything I needed to know. For all her talk about love and family, she hadn't truly grasped the damage she was inflicting. I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor. Here's what's going to happen, I said firmly. You have until the end of the week to figure out where you're going to stay. In the meantime, I want you to move your things into the spare bedroom. Sharing a bed isn't an option anymore. Her face fell. Marcus, don't you think that's a bit extreme? No, I think it's practical, I replied. You're asking for freedom to pursue other men. You can't expect me to share a bed with you while you plan your excursions. If you're going to walk this path, start walking. I turned and walked toward the door, pausing only to say, and for the record, if you think this ends with you coming back here as though nothing happened, think again. I don't play the role of a fool. Sophia's voice trembled as she finally asked, Are you really asking me to leave, Marcus? I turned back to face her, my expression impassive. For now, yes. Let me be crystal clear, Sophia. I don't want you to go down this path at all. But if you're insistent, then you're not staying here while you do it. We vowed to be faithful when we got married, and now you're openly planning to break that vow. What exactly do you expect me to do? Watch from the sidelines while you date and sleep with other men? If this is going to be an open marriage, then I'll have the same options, won't I? She stared at me, her lips parting as though to respond, but no words came. I didn't wait for her to gather her thoughts. I grabbed my car keys and headed toward the door. Where are you going? She called after me, her voice tinged with panic. I don't know yet, I replied, opening the door. But remember to move your things into the spare bedroom and start looking for somewhere else to stay. And let me be perfectly clear. You're not engaging in any affairs until you've left this house. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, deliberately louder than usual. The sound reverberated like a punctuation mark on the conversation. Out of the house, driving aimlessly, I considered heading straight to Jessica's apartment to confront her. But I quickly dismissed the thought. Jessica wasn't the root of the problem. Sophia was. She'd made her choice, and now she could deal with the inconvenience it brought. If Jessica wanted to play enabler, that was on her. I wasn't about to waste my energy chasing side distractions. Monday morning. By Monday, I was out of the house and at the office before Sophia even woke up. I had no interest in starting another round of the same conversation. Instead, I focused my energy on practical steps. If Sophia thought I was going to sit idly by while she pursued this ridiculous exploration, she was sorely mistaken. First on my list was contacting my attorney. Fortunately, I already had a trusted legal contact, a close friend who was well-versed in everything from real estate to estate planning. I explained the situation briefly, and while he wasn't a divorce attorney, he immediately recommended a colleague in his firm who specialized in family law. By that afternoon, I had a meeting scheduled with her. Meeting the attorney. The divorce attorney was a sharp, no-nonsense professional who immediately put me at ease. After explaining the situation, she assured me that I was in a strong position legally, especially since we didn't have children yet. While I hadn't decided on divorce outright, I wanted to be prepared. I don't want to start a war over assets, I told her. We built this life together, and I'm fine with a 50-50 split if it comes to that. I just need to protect myself. She nodded, taking notes. That's a fair approach, Marcus. But be prepared. If she pushes for something more, you'll need to stand your ground. We discussed potential next steps, and she promised to have initial paperwork ready should I decide to move forward. For now, I would wait until I had concrete evidence of Sophia's infidelity. This was just preparation. The week drags on. I made a point of spending as little time at home as possible. Most evenings, I hit the gym to clear my head and burn off the frustration that simmered beneath the surface. Sophia, meanwhile, seemed to spend more and more time with Jessica. By Thursday, she announced that she would be staying at Jessica's place for a couple of weeks while she figured out her next steps. The arrangement didn't surprise me. It was convenient for Sophia. Jessica was practically a cheerleader for this kind of behavior. From what I knew of her, Jessica's personal life was a train wreck, filled with short-lived affairs and messy breakups. It wasn't hard to see where Sophia might have gotten some of these ideas. The weekend. By Saturday, exactly 1 week after our 5th wedding anniversary, Sophia was packing her belongings into her car. I watched from the kitchen window, my expression unreadable. When she finally finished, she hesitated by the driver's side door, as though summoning the courage to say something. She walked back toward the house and stepped inside, her eyes pleading. "Marcus, I don't want to go. Are you absolutely sure we can't find a way to work through this? I love you, and I want to make our marriage better." I crossed my arms, meeting her gaze evenly. "If you truly loved me and wanted to improve our marriage, you wouldn't be doing this in the first place. I've made it clear. I want you here, but not under these conditions. If you won't even consider counseling to address our issues, I don't know what else there is to say." Her face crumpled, but I didn't let it affect me. "Sophia, you're asking for my blessing to betray me. That's not love. I won't tolerate it." She took a step closer, her voice soft. "I promise this is just temporary, Marcus. I'll come back, and we'll rebuild everything. I just need this time." "No," I said firmly. "You've made your choice, Sophia. Now live with it. But don't think for a second that everything will go back to normal when you decide you're done. If you want to explore other men, go ahead, but don't expect me to be waiting for you on the other side." Her shoulders slumped, and for a moment, I thought she might change her mind. But instead, she nodded silently, turned, and walked out the door. As I watched her car pull out of the driveway, I felt a strange mix of relief and finality. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. But one thing was clear. The woman I had married was gone, and I wasn't about to let her drag me down with her. Securing the house. As Sophia loaded the last of her belongings into her car, I headed straight for the hardware store. This wasn't a decision born of impulsiveness, but one of practicality. By the time I returned home, I had everything I needed: 3 new locks and a replacement keypad for the garage door. I worked methodically, replacing each lock and resetting the garage security code. By the time I was finished, I felt a sense of control returning, even if just for a moment. If Sophia wanted to choose her new path, she could, but she wouldn't waltz back in whenever she felt like it. A quiet weekend, Saturday night, and all of Sunday passed in an unsettling quiet. The house, once filled with conversation and activity, now seemed hollow. But I refused to let the silence consume me. Instead, I focused on structure, organizing my space, meal prepping for the week, and thinking about what came next. When thoughts of Sophia crept in, I forced myself to stay logical. She had made her choice, and so had I. There was no point dwelling on what might have been. Reflections and research. The following week was grueling. I threw myself into my routine. Daily gym sessions and evening runs became my escape. But even with the distraction of physical exertion, I couldn't ignore the gnawing questions in my mind. I found myself diving into research late at night, trying to understand the psychology of infidelity and what drove someone to betray their partner. What I discovered was both surprising and frustrating. Studies revealed that nearly 40% of married individuals admit to infidelity, and many of them remain in their marriages. Some spouses even tolerated the behavior in silence, especially when children were involved, as if turning a blind eye could restore a semblance of normalcy. I wasn't blind, nor was I willing to play the part of a silent martyr. Sophia's actions weren't about saving our marriage. They were about selfishness. The more I read, the more resolved I became. If she wanted to believe this was temporary, that was her delusion, not mine. Tracking Sophia's moves. By midweek, Sophia had fully moved in with Jessica. From the brief communication she sent, asking for her mail to be forwarded, it was clear she had no immediate plans to reconcile. It wasn't a message of apology or regret. It was purely logistical. I considered driving past Jessica's apartment, just to see if Sophia was around or catch a glimpse of who she was spending her time with. But I stopped myself. What good would it do? I didn't need to stoop to snooping. I already knew the score. My focus was on my own life and ensuring I stayed one step ahead. A message unspoken. Saturday morning came, marking exactly 1 week since our 5th anniversary dinner had unraveled into chaos. Sophia returned to the house briefly to gather a few more items. I watched from the living room window as she moved back and forth between the door and her car. When she was nearly finished, she hesitated, standing by the car with her hands on her hips. Finally, she turned and walked back toward the house. I opened the door before she could knock. "Marcus," she began, her voice low and uncertain, "I don't want to leave like this. Are you sure we can't find a way to make this work?" I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe, my expression unreadable. "Sophia, I've been clear from the start. I want this marriage to work, but not under these circumstances. If you were serious about fixing things, we'd be talking about counseling, not boyfriends. You've made your choice, and now you have to live with it." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I love you, Marcus. I want us to be happy again. Then why are you walking away from everything we built together?" I asked pointedly. "If you wanted happiness with me, you wouldn't be chasing it somewhere else. Love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice. And right now, you're choosing to betray that." She stepped closer, her voice softening. "I promise it's temporary. Once I figure things out, we can rebuild. We can be stronger than ever." "No," I said firmly. "It doesn't work that way. You can't blow up a bridge and expect it to magically rebuild itself. If you wanted us to be stronger, you'd have stayed and worked on this with me, not with someone else." Her shoulders slumped as the reality of my words sank in. "Is this really it?" "That's up to you," I said. "But don't expect me to sit around waiting while you figure out if I'm worth committing to. If you leave now, understand that you're leaving for good." She nodded silently, turned, and walked back to her car. Moving forward, as her car disappeared down the street, I closed the door and stood in the quiet house. It wasn't the ending I had hoped for, but it was the one she had chosen. And now it was time for me to choose my own path forward. No regrets, no second-guessing, just clarity.